You're like,
Okay, so welcome to The Bridge. This is the Bridge webinar hosted by the Masters of Educational Technology program at Michigan State University. I'm Michelle Shearer-Hegerman, and I'm joined here by Rohit Mehta. We're here in East Lansing at Michigan State, but we are joined today by Jitani Rebello and Sean Sweeney, who are fabulous MAET colleagues joining from two places globally. Sean is in Lima, Peru, and Jitani is in Delhi, India today. And we are going to be having a conversation about global issues in ed tech. Here in the States, President Obama recently announced appointed a woman as the Chief Technology Officer of the United States government, Megan Smith. And soon we'll be celebrating Ada Lovelace Day. And these are sort of two moments to celebrate women in technology. And of course, as part of the Masters of Educational Technology program, we have fabulous MAET alumni and colleagues, faculty colleagues, who are also women who have a voice to add to the conversation. So we're going to start off this fall on the Bridge with a global conversation about trends in ed tech with our two colleagues today. We're hoping that a third colleague, Laura Phillips, will join in from Seoul, South Korea. But she has not been able to join us yet, so she may join in partway through. But we know Laura, and I know that she'll add some great conversation if and when she's able to join in. So I'm going to start actually by asking Jitani to introduce herself, and then Sean will introduce herself, and then we've got a great list of questions that we're going to be talking about. So Jitani, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm stoked to be a part of this conversation, and I'm also, I've been really happy in my career with Michigan State, through my Master's of Arts in Educational Technology, and so it's a real pleasure to be here and to talk to you. I've been working at AES at the American Embassy School of New Delhi, India, for the past year and a half. I started as an English as an additional language teacher, which is what I've been doing for a long time. I started teaching when I was 16 years old, EAL or ESL to fellow Brazilians, as I come from Brazil. And I started my international career in 2011 when I moved to Bangkok. And I also taught English as an additional language. And that's where I actually found or fell in love with technology and with, the possibilities and the empowerment that comes through the use of technology. And also, felt like I could pursue that professionally, and that's where I started the program, which led me to the American Embassy School. And in my second year, I applied and was hired to become the technology coach in elementary school, which is what I'm doing right now. So I am currently helping upper elementary teachers, 3rd to 5th grade teachers, with the integration of technology in their classrooms. So I currently work with 18 different teachers on a day-to-day basis, and I've been fascinated by this work, and so I guess that's it.
Thank you so much. Sean, how about you?
Sure. Again, thank you very much for inviting me. This is great. I love to be able to geek out for a bit and chat about ed tech, so this is a really excellent opportunity. So I am Sean Marie Sweeney. I go by Sean, to keep it simple. But I've been working in, I guess, on the educational technology side for, I guess the past 8 years. I've had more of an official title, but prior to that I was teaching 6th grade science and language arts, and kind of rolled into this position because I found that I really loved what technology could offer to the classroom in changing the way that we're providing learning opportunities to students. And so as I recognized those opportunities and kind of worked with my colleagues to help them recognize some of those opportunities, it just kind of opened some doors where I went into the MAET program to be able to upskill myself, to have a little bit more intelligent things to talk about. So it's been great. Worked at the American School Foundation in Monterrey, Mexico, and was their Director of Technology Integration for the past 4 years. Prior to that, I've been working in the United States in Zionsville, Indiana, and was helping them launch one-to-one program there. And I've just recently assumed this role as the Director of Technology Integration for the American School in Lima, Peru, which is called Colegio Roosevelt. And so I'm very excited about the new position and learning new things and new tools and working with a new group of people. So every time you make a switch, you learn new stuff, and that's what I'm all about. So
yeah, that's fantastic. Well, and that's why, you know, we both bring such deep and broad experiences. That's why we're so excited to have you here on the bridge. So thanks so much for joining. I did want to mention that for people who are viewing out on the interwebs and would like to participate in the conversation today, you can join in on Twitter. Just add hashtag MAET all one word, MAETBRIDGE, and Rohit will be watching the back channel, and he will bring in questions and comments to the live conversation, so we'll do our best to address your questions. So hashtag MAET. All right, ladies, so let's get into this conversation. I'm really excited to hear what you have to think and say. You know, one of the questions sort of on my mind, Jitani, you are working in Delhi. Sean, you've been in Mexico, you're working in Lima. I would love to hear both of you talk about the issues that you see schools dealing with at present in terms of ed tech. What are the most pressing issues on schools' minds? Who'd like to start?
Gee, I'll let you go first. Oh, okay, I can go first.
Right.
Sorry, everybody's trying to be too polite. All right, I'll go ahead and jump in then. Well, I tell you, in Latin America, one of the biggest issues we face is just bandwidth. But but with that aside, you know, I think that the opportunities to expand teachers' technological knowledge is one of the things that I see as I work with schools internationally throughout Latin America and then also back in the States. You know, one of the things that we're facing is just teachers don't necessarily know all of the opportunities that are available to change the learning experience for students when they don't have that technological knowledge. But it takes a lot of time to develop that technological knowledge. If you look at professional development and what they say is best practice to make sure that there's strong understanding in a particular area, and well-developed knowledge base is about 20 hours. And so if you think about that, and the amount of time that we get to actually work with teachers to develop their technological knowledge, so that then they can say, oh, these are my options. This is going to be the best choice for improving the student learning student learning experience, then I think that's kind of the piece, that there's so much to learn, and it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing, and so it's tough to stay in front of that wave, if you will.
Yeah. I have to agree. I guess in international schools there has been a push for technology integration for some time. We follow the American curriculum, and so and there, depending on the school you're at, there are usually very good resources. So our schools are well equipped. So we have, usually have the best equipment. We are, in my school, for example, we are on a one-to-one iPad environment in elementary school and middle school, and we use MacBook Air in high school. So what happens is that, as Sean mentioned, these teachers come in and they have this extensive knowledge on pedagogical resources and content, and they are still, trying to find their feet in technology and how to integrate that technology in their teaching. So I guess we all offer PD opportunities, and there are, not only what the school offers, but there's also all of the information that's available online through Twitter, through forums, etc. But there's still, it's an overwhelming amount of information. So getting them to start, getting them to think, to confidently integrate technology in their curriculum can be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I think kind of following up on that is, some schools often will invest in the resources, but maybe don't give enough thought to maybe how what's driving that choice to implement those resources. So we've purchased the iPads, but did we purchase those iPads because that's what our content needs, that's what our pedagogy is asking for, or do we purchase those because, well, the other school down the street's doing it, so we need to keep up with them?
Yeah.
And what you'll find, kind of going back to that technological knowledge piece, is if we haven't properly prepared the teachers, if we haven't properly supported them, then they're not going to feel comfortable and confident using that as an educational tool. And then that's not going to, again, enhance the learning experience for students. And I think that sometimes schools forget about the importance of providing a position like G and I have, where we're here to support the teachers. Hey, you might not know this yet, but you know what? That's my area of strength. So let me take on that piece of teaching for you. Let me come into the classroom. Let me teach the technological piece. You learn from me. The students learn from me. And now the next time around, you can go ahead and do that confidently and comfortably on your own, and understand how that works. So, but when the schools don't provide those types of supports and really don't think through, the clear reason why they're choosing to use these technologies, then it's not going to set you up for a positive learning experience, and then that's what it's all about.
Yeah. So, Sean, that last question, it really does sort of raise a question in my mind about what you would like to see happening in schools, right? So you've identified sort of support, right, for technologies in schools, and GU as well, as essential, and you're both in those kinds of roles. From where you sit in your present positions, what's your vision? Like, where do you see that schools need to go, and how can your role be a part of that vision? What would you like to see happening? This is sort of a question that allows you to sort of imagine, and then we can maybe even come back to the reality a little bit. But where do you imagine? What do you kind of see as the processes that would be game changers for schools? Maybe that's a way to think about it too.
Sorry, G, I don't know. Do you want to start on this one? I started on the last one, but.
Well, I would be curious to listen from you first, actually.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. I'm just afraid that I'm going to scare people. I think that it comes back to. Right, when we think of education, technology is just a tool. It's just a resource that we use in order to facilitate learning. So it's not necessarily always about the technology, but it's about how we think about education. And I think that what technology provides is an excellent opportunity for us to really look at, wow, we have these new resources available to us that we've never had available before that can really change what we're able to do in the classroom. So how can we harness those and move into a different model? So for instance, I think of, if we think of students who are more independent at the upper grade levels, maybe 8th through 12th grade, these are students that, they're allowed to go to the mall and hang out by themselves and do things like that. We trust in their independence, but we still bring them every day to a four-walled classroom and say, this is what you need to learn. But technology, I think, allows us to break down those walls. And why haven't we really looked at that quite yet? Why don't students wake up in the morning and they've received a text message from their teacher saying, hey, you're going to get off at bus stop X, and we're going to all meet at this museum, and we're going to explore these different pieces of art, but then we're going to shift and we're going to head down to work on some sort of community outreach program, and things like that. Because when we can take this learning mobile and we can actually be in the environments where we're applying what we're learning, I think it's going to change the way that we see students interacting with what they understand about the world, and what they can learn. I recently I volunteered with the Techo group, which is, they build homes for less fortunate. And we'd taken a group of students, and it was just amazing to watch, that feedback cycle, because they realized that, hey, I dug a hole and I put this in, and you know what, it wasn't level, and close enough isn't good enough, right? No, I have to do it right, and I have to do it well, and I have to keep redoing it until it's done correctly, because otherwise the house is going to fall down the hill.
Mm-hmm.
And then that defeats the purpose of me being here and spending my entire weekend building this house for this family. And I don't feel like students get that realistic feedback system as often as they can and as often as they should for their learning. And so I think that the more that we can step outside of the classroom and provide them those opportunities, I think that the more they're going to see how important their learning is, where it applies to the world, and be able to actually test out what they know and the skills that they have. I don't think that it necessarily comes down to the technology, but it comes down to the opportunities or the doors that are opened by technology, just because we can change what's happening in the way that we're communicating, the way that we're collecting artifacts. Students are collecting videos and images and recordings of interviews that they're doing with people, and getting into, we want to design a magazine in class. Great, let's go and, just this past week, one of our groups went into and they toured one of the most famous magazines here in Lima, Peru, and got that opportunity and got to ask their questions and explore those things. And I think that's important, that we're kind of expanding and rethinking the way that we're expecting kids to learn.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said about, taking kids to that next level, or taking them to real places, and allowing them the opportunity to see how they can be a part of that, or how they can change and how they can become change agents themselves. I think that my vision of technology is similar. One thing that I dream about, and I've been reading a lot about, is really the opportunity to personalize learning. Mm-hmm. The opportunity to make it as individualized as we can. I think I've been having these conversations with teachers at school, because we all have those high flyers, and we all, and we can see that they are not challenged, that they're not enjoying the class as much as maybe the other students are. And if, through technology we can assess them continuously, and we can see where what their strengths are, and where they can move on, and provide opportunities through technology or not for them to advance. I think that's a big goal, I would say. So I feel like all of the opportunities that we are given, to provide formative assessment with, as the many tools that are available today, is really a big piece of what we're going to see in the future more and more. And also, being able to not have a linear learning approach, not have, kids grouped by age, for example. I've been seeing amazing examples of schools that have specific schedules for kids, and I think that's beautiful. I would like to see that happen in the near future.
Yeah, I think that's, that data mining piece is amazing. Never before have we been able to have instant feedback on what kids really, really know. And when you go to kind of breaking down that board on date, Sir Ken Robinson that talked about it years ago now, and saying, why are we still saying you were born on this day, this is where you should be at in your cognitive abilities? And so if we can really break down those walls using the technology on a daily basis, we can see, what have you learned, what do you understand, and where should you be? And yeah, gee, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because it's one of those things that, again, we just haven't figured out how to harness that. And, kind of going back to that same idea, I think it was Richard, and I don't know if I pronounced his last name correctly, so please correct me, but Richard Culata?
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay?
Right.
Culata.
The tech officer. Yeah.
Yeah, and he talks about a school where the kids walk in and it's kind of like walking into an airport and seeing, oh, today this is the math class that I'm heading to because yesterday this is what I've learned, and instead of every day I go to the same teacher learning page 26 just like every other kid, even though that's not necessarily where I'm at in my cognitive ability. So yeah, I mean, I think that these are exciting times. It's just really, in education, we're always being pushed forward and, okay, the next thing, and sometimes we don't stop to think, okay, but what could we be doing so that we can work more efficiently, so that we can really, teach and educate better, more efficiently. But sometimes we get kind of caught moving forward, and instead of taking that time to reflect and say, what resources do we have available? How can we make this job easier?
Right.
Right.
Well, that's a great segue, actually, Sean, to a question that I really wanted to ask of G about how to make that thinking that our students are doing, whether they're the high flyers or the students who really could benefit from a lot more time focused on a particular idea or set of skills. How do we do that with technology? How do we really get our students engaged with tools in ways that teachers can use to do the work that they do best, which is to scaffold and support?
Right. Well, I actually am really passionate about the idea of making thinking visible, and that is something that we have been studying. I would say, and actually I have the book right here. And I'm not selling this book or anything, but this is the book that we've been using at school, and I'm sure that a lot of international schools and a lot of American schools are currently using this material, which is a framework. Oops, just a minute. Which is a framework for making thinking visible and using thinking routines to unfold their thinking process, students' thinking process, and what I think is the most fascinating part of this is that we are building on their metacognitive skills. So we are helping them see, thinking as a process, and they're also helping us see or find their misconceptions and their prior knowledge and their reasoning abilities and their degrees of understanding. And what I think is fascinating about this process with technology is that we can, effectively document their thinking and document their progress and, have this continuous feedback through what we can do, using technology. So we can definitely use these thinking routines, which are, things like I used to think, now I think, or think, pair, share, or, CSI. There are thinking routines that we use constantly in the classroom, and then we turn them into products. So those could be posters, those could be tutorials. A tool that is very, very active in our school is Explain Everything, for example. Kids use it all the time. They'll do a math problem, for example, and then they'll use Explain Everything to go ahead and explain what they were thinking and how they solved that problem. Mm-hmm. And it's been used for kids to document their thinking, and it's also been used for those high flyers to create tutorials for other kids, which I think is fascinating and really helps students because they connect so much to their peers when they're watching those tutorials. And and other tools that could be other products that could be created are cartoons, posters, movies, digital books, podcasts. I mean, the options are many and varied, and they're all in what ends up happening is a concrete piece of evidence of learning or thinking. So I know that there are, as I said, there are many tools out there. I named a couple, but really the process, getting them to think and getting them to show these misconceptions and these, their reasoning is really the most important thing that I can see from it.
Yes, Sean, do you have any other thoughts to add on G? That was terrific. I completely agree, G, with the ideas that you've presented. They're just so powerful, those examples. So, Sean, go ahead.
I think one of the great things that G was just talking about, is those students demonstrating their learning, and I think e-portfolios have a great opportunity to help collect all of those different resources that kids are generating, and allowing them to really reflect on their learning, which of course then helps them better understand how they learn and how they can improve upon their learning process. And I think that it would really be beneficial if kind of our university levels and upper levels can start looking at how those can be leveraged to help us understand, who really are those students that they're standing out and standing above, and have a good sense of who they are as learners, because sometimes even our highest scoring students on particular tests might not be necessarily the best students in the end, or even the best employee in the end, because maybe they're not as well-rounded. And I think that e-portfolios can maybe help show all of the different aspects of a child a little bit better than what we've used in the past, which is relying upon kind of those SAT scores and examination scores. So.
Right, and e-portfolios are also a great opportunity for them to demonstrate creativity and productivity, right? So, I find that is another thing that comes from the thinking, comes from the process. How and where can they stand out? If it's through creativity, if they're able to create a product that they're proud of, and that that they're keeping in their portfolio, and that will show the progress of their learning. That is also a really powerful tool. Mm-hmm. And I forgot to mention this, but I just remembered we've used these thinking routines too in our teacher orientation, and with parents. So we had a parent tech coffee, and we talked about what we're doing in technology in elementary school, and we use one of these thinking routines that's called compass points, and it's about like what excites them, what worries, and what suggestions they have, and what they need to know. And we were able to have terrific conversations, based on what we saw, on the feedback that we received. And they didn't use technology for that specifically. They wrote on sticky notes, but we were able to then look back at that and address questions and listen to their suggestions, which I thought was terrific as well.
Well, G, and I think you make a valid point there, because even those sticky notes, those are our sources of technology too, and it comes down to knowing what your options are, but choosing the best tool for what you're trying to get done. And very often still it's the sticky note is the best tool, and in making things happen. And so I think that's an important thing to remember and realize as we have this conversation is, sure, you might know about all of the technological tools out there when we think of digital technologies, but still, let's not forget about paper and pencil, because it absolutely has its place in the classroom.
Right, absolutely. Actually, today I had a conversation with a teacher about that, where he was telling me that he, at this point, he's still getting used to the idea of having iPads readily available for his students, and that he's expecting the moment when students will not see the iPad as, oh my God, we're going to use the iPads, as like a silly thing of, it's something different, but it's a tool. It's just another thing that helps them, progress in their learning. So, yeah, I think we're all working towards that in our integration pieces.
Well, and you kind of lead me into one of the things that I like to think about is oftentimes, the kids absolutely, they're like, oh, I get to use an iPad in class, or oh, I get to use a laptop. And there is that kind of learning curve for the kids of it's a toy, and oh wait, now I understand it as a tool and how it can help my learning. But that's also another reason why it's so important that we start doing things differently and thinking about education differently when we have access to these tools, because I feel like, and I'm going to go back to Richard Culata's statement of, how can we quit copying and pasting, or kind of, just making a digital version of education of the past, and instead look at education of the future, because you know, if teachers are using you know, just the digital version PDF rather than printing something off. Now, it is great because sometimes we do have things that we need to read, and a PDF works excellently. But kind of rethinking, if it was boring or unengaging to students beforehand when it was on paper, we can't just think that, oh, because it's digital, it's going to make it, you know, more interesting or more engaging for kids. But really looking at, well, what's my pedagogy here? You know, what am I trying to get kids to learn, and why are they disengaged? What have I tried in the past? What could I try in the future? And thinking about different strategies. And sure, technology might come into play there because there are different opportunities, but that's where I think we need to be taking that time to reflect and say, okay, if it was boring before when they had to fill out a worksheet, it's still going to be boring if I transform that worksheet into a Google form. So what am I really trying to get at when it comes to student learning, and how can I do that differently? How can I rethink how I'm engaging kids with this information that they really need to learn and know longer than just until the next test is? So.
Right. Sean, if I can jump in, I mean, one of the ways that we can support engagement, right, is by making sure that the activities that we're designing for students are authentic and give them agency, right? So we know that agency, a feeling of control, and the ability of a student to contribute to his or her own sort of trajectory of learning is really pivotal. What do you see as the possible tools out there, you know, using your experiences? What tools or practices, you know, around those tools are supporting agency and really supporting engagement?
It's a good question. Well, I think that we need to look at, you know, I try not to necessarily start with the tool first.
Right.
You know, I try and always look at what we're trying to get kids to do, but I think that sometimes it's thinking about the content and how is that applicable to the real world? How does it come into play, and where's the kid actually going to need this information in the future? But then also thinking about, when I think about the tools and how we utilize them in the classroom, I think it's important that we really start looking at how accessible information is, right? And so instead of looking at kids learning facts or learning information, instead, how are kids applying that information or utilizing that information? It is still very important that kids learn facts. We know that, you know, cognitive scientists say over and over again, in order to build your knowledge base, you have to have a good baseline of you know, facts in order to build upon and develop connections and
Sure.
understand bigger ideas. So I'm not saying let's step away from learning facts, but more so, how are kids using that information? Because if we think about it, they can always access those facts again. If they know, oh, I think I know something about, you know, President Roosevelt and what president he was. Well, I can go and find what number he was. It's important that I know he was a president. And so, but how are we using skills like information literacy to analyze the resources that we are finding? And how are we using skills like problem solving, critically thinking about these different facts and how they come into play? You know, instead of looking at when the War of 1812 was, well, why did that actually transpire? And how has that affected the rest of the world? And how have there been similar things that have happened, you know, since then? And kind of looking at it from that perspective, where the kids actually have to really critique and analyze and use some of these bigger resources. And if we think about like things, and I guess if we go back to the tools and how the tools are kind of changing things, you know, different I guess up and coming tools like Google Glass, you know, we're going to have information and just the Internet of Things. Information is everywhere, and so we can tap into those things, but we need to be prepared to use that information and really harness it for our learning and for moving forward. But yeah, I don't know if that necessarily, I didn't really get after the tools per se, but
well, the practices are as important, aren't they? I mean, more
yeah.
important, really. I mean, that was sort of what I was getting at as well. I mean, there's a tool that may facilitate engagement, but ultimately that tool is embedded in practice. And so I think, yeah, what you've said is terrific. G, I wonder if you've got any other thoughts to add there in terms of engagement, what you see as promising practice for supporting engagement.
Well, I really think that students are, they tend to be engaged when the activity is something that is meaningful to them. So, for example, if you are able to offer choices, which is, that leads to student agency, if you're able to offer choices to assignments that you are asking them to do, for example, you are getting them engaged because they have an option. They can go and choose whatever makes them feel more comfortable, in terms of presenting their thinking, because that's what they will be doing when they are turning in their assignments. I think that what Sean said is really important, because we're going back to the thinking. It's the information literacy and the new literacies, digital access and global literacy, and how students connect, and all of these skills are still, I feel like we're working towards them. There's a path, but maybe teachers are still, I don't know, it's taking a little bit longer for them to see that these skills are really what they need right now. And we talk a lot about 21st century skills, right? But it's right now skills.
Yeah.
This is what they're doing every day. I guess I wouldn't be able to talk about tools as well, because as I said, it's so hard to talk about tools. There are so many tools, and information is readily available. But how can we, get them to confidently access the information? So maybe getting them engaged through the use of different assignment types, different tools, is one way. But there's that philosophical piece that we need to somehow connect to whatever it is that we're doing for engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I'm still not going to tackle the tool thing, because coming back to just giving kids an opportunity to that just-in-time learning, right? They're tackling a problem, and I need to understand how this piece of information intertwines with that piece of information in order to tackle this problem. And so I think that's where we kind of need to focus in order to get kids engaged in what they're most interested in, and then showing them how, they're interested in this and they can improve. Great, you want to be a good soccer player? You need to learn about forces in motion, because the way that you strike that ball that's coming at you is going to completely change the trajectory of that ball moving away from your foot. So let's talk about that. The harder you strike the ball, or with, the more directly you strike the ball, and we can go into deep conversations about that, and we've given that context for students where they're engaged, they want to understand that, they want to run some scientific tests on how that ball plays off of their foot and how they can interact better with that ball. So I think that we need to really start looking at, and kind of going back to what G was saying, again, differentiating, looking at each student on an individual level. And how can we harness technology to help us do that, and then provide, that personalized learning opportunity where, we're connecting with educators all over the world, and hey, your specialty is, forces in motion in soccer. Boom. This kid is no longer sitting in my science class, but instead is engaged online in a conversation with a teacher that is focused on that. And I, as a teacher, my specialty is, figure skating and whatever, friction. And so I'm doing a lecture on that. Don't ever call me and ask me to teach about that, because I don't know, not a good figure skater. But you know what I mean. Let's harness the teachers and their specialties, the students and what they're interested in, and we can connect these groups through the use of technology, and that's where it starts to come in and allow us to really reach kids on what they're engaged with. And absolutely, we need to introduce them to things that maybe they hadn't thought of as opportunities, or thought of, I could be interested in this. I didn't even know I could be interested in this because I didn't know it was an option. So, we still have to expose them to things that maybe they don't know that they like, but But yeah, I think, there's always that tip of the iceberg. How do we get them started? How do we get them excited?
Right. We've started experimenting with passion learning too at school, for a period of time, say Friday morning, teachers will allow students to, think about a question, something that they would like to learn, and then go ahead and start working with it, So I would be interested to know if that's something that's been happening in your school as well, or if it's something that you're, thinking that could potentially happen.
There's actually something called My Choice at our school, and so during My Choice time, students can either offer seminars or they can choose, teachers offer different, not seminars, but just different workshops, I guess would be the better term, on various topics. And so it's an opportunity for kids to explore their choice. What do they want to learn more about? And so then kids choose, students choose based on their level of interest, and it does, breaks down the lines of, oh, I'm a 6th grader, or I'm a 12th grader. No, that doesn't matter. We have this common interest. We're going to come together along these lines, and we're shooting for smaller groups and so on and so forth. But that's something that we do on Wednesdays. Yeah. So from on various Wednesdays throughout the month, from 8 to 9:30. That's My Choice time, and so then that's where kids engage with these different things. We're just about to start, so we've been doing a lot of beginning of the school year stuff, and so My Choice actually starts tomorrow. Will be the first day that we do that. But so I'm excited to see it in action, because I think that it's an excellent opportunity for kids to kind of pursue what they're passionate about, which is part of our mission here at FDR.
Cool. And is that divisional or divisions? Is it like middle school, elementary school?
We're primary and secondary. We're an IB school, and so 6th grade through 12th grade we do the My Choice piece.
Okay, that's really cool. Ladies, I've got a question for you. So this line of conversation actually, I think, is quite visionary. Thinking really about the global classroom, right? So Sean, you were talking a little bit ago about sort of your vision for connecting experts with students, right? And that the power of the network is that we can do that. We have the capacity, the potential to do that. In 1996, there was this group of scholars that got together. They called themselves the New London Group, and they sort of outlined this vision, right, for really kind of what you're talking about. And they called it sort of a pedagogy of multiliteracies. And certainly some of the skills that you've been talking about here, information literacy skills and digital literacy skills, knowing how to sort of construct meaning across multiple texts, how to critically evaluate information. So those, of course, were the skills that were included in part of this vision. But the other piece really was focused on the social aspects, right? So the internet brings us together in ways that were not previously possible. We live in this increasingly globalized community. But one of the challenges, of course, that remain is how do we teach kids using these technologies to become global citizens, right? How do we teach them to be thoughtful of one another and to understand and develop sort of this cultural responsiveness, how to be sort of culturally aware and responsive to the others with whom we connect and interact on the internet, right, and through these channels. And I would really love, as we're thinking about sort of trends and directions and sort of setting a vision for where we could go in terms of cultural connectedness, I would just love to hear your thoughts about what we can do in schools using tools and technologies, what practices, again, could support that idea. And G, I'd love to hear your thoughts first, just because, you bring such a wealth of experience as an EAL teacher as well.
Yeah.
Well, I've just started working with this, really, and I've been seeing, even though, I was before, as a classroom teacher, I was already getting my students to blog and to comment and, have this global connectedness. Maybe I should say it that way. But I now, from this perspective, from a technology integration specialist, I've been thinking about what else we can do. So how else can I get my students connected with the world? And is it through Twitter, or what other platforms will allow for this meaningful interaction, and how can we get our students to become change agents? Well, I guess there's a technology piece, but there's also the foundational piece that comes through service learning and other venues that are explored at our school or in any school. So even the idea of passion learning and how we encourage students to to choose things that they would like to pursue. But always thinking, responsibly of how that will affect others, how that will affect their online presence, and how that will create their digital footprint, and how how else what other things they need to do in order to become this responsible global citizen. So, in elementary school specifically, we talk about responsible use guidelines. It is our very first, week with students where, we discuss, and I'm talking 3rd, 4th grade, 5th grade students here, where we talk about online and offline behaviors and make that connection. For example, we show them how the fact that they keep their cafeteria clean and their classroom clean so that their classmates are safe. And I even play and show them, talk about, what if you leave a banana on the floor or something like that, and someone steps on it and slips, and they're not safe, right? So we talk about that. And then we talk about how when they're using shared services such as, the Drive or the Dropbox, they need to be respectful of each other's folders and then we talk about the broader community, and when they post online, they also need to think who's going to be reading that and how are they affecting those people. So I guess from an elementary school perspective, I think we talk about very specific choices, offline, online choices, like asking someone to take their picture before taking their picture and things like that. I would be curious to know, how Sean sees it from, this global director perspective, overseeing all divisions. But this is the work that we've been we've been doing at school, and that I find has potential. I'm still learning, and every day, there's more to add to that.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's really important as we look at global connectedness that we do understand the different cultures, right? And I loved what G was saying about the service learning piece. It is important that we're no longer isolated by, this is where I grew up, this is the town I grew up in, and maybe I'd venture outside of that. But now we can be connected so easily. I hate to say it, but I love Facebook for this, in the sense of, I have friends that teach internationally all over the world. And being able to connect with them in just a click of a button, being able to send G a message and say, hey, how are things going over there in New Delhi? And that just wasn't imaginable before, that this conversation could happen. And so it's also important. I know I've also run into accidentally offending one of my very good friends from the MAET program because of something that I just said and I hadn't really thought about. And I'm so grateful that she sent me a message and said, hey Sean, what was that comment? Because that hurt my feelings. And it was like, wow, I hadn't even thought about it through her eyes and through her cultural experience. And when I did, I thought, good gravy, and I thought I had my hand wrapped around this whole global connectedness thing. And so it was a great learning opportunity for me. But I think what's important is, with technology, it's connected us, but it still keeps that barrier. So I think that, if I think of my MAET experiences, I've been lucky enough to teach for the online courses for the certificate program, but then I've also taught for the summer program. And in the summer program, we do a cohort internationally, and we all come together. And there's much more connection between the students, between the instructors, when we're all together. And I think the learning experience is better. I think that MAET has done an awesome job of creating fabulous online. Based on the online courses that I've taught, have done a really nice job of connecting the students and getting them to interact. But I think there's still just that element of sitting in a classroom with somebody and having a clear conversation with no question about, well, what was the tone on that? Or what did that person mean with that statement? And not being able to instantly ask them about that or understand them on a more personable level. So I think that, yes, we can connect and have these connections through the technology and kind of bridge those gaps internationally. And when we can't travel, like today, this is a great opportunity where the three of us could not be having this conversation without the technological piece. But it also helps that we've all three met each other in real life. And, well, Michelle, actually, I haven't met you in real life, but I feel like I have.
Actually, Sean, that's really funny that we've not actually breathed the same air. I feel like,
I know. Maybe I just blew my whole point out of the water. I don't know.
No, but you know what? We have had so many of these conversations that I feel, that we do want to know one another. And I mean, Angie, we just met today. So, right? And Rohit, obviously, is just meeting you also. So it does bridge it. But you're right, Sean, right? There is that shared common experience that goes a long way to supporting then the online interactions that we can have.
Well, and I think that also just the piece of being in a culture itself,
you
get to understand it so much better. And I've been fortunate enough to travel a lot around the world. But even some of those places where I've just gotten a brief glimpse of, I was in Italy, but I was in Italy for 5 days, I still don't feel like I necessarily have a great grasp on their culture. And I was in Turkey, and I was in Turkey for 2 weeks. But again, that's just a small, glimpse of that culture, and it's the tourist perspective. And if we go back to that question that you'd asked in the earlier portion of this chat, you'd ask, like, what do you, big pie in the sky idea. And I'd love to see us, I know already we work at the lower levels and we say, okay, this is your school, this is your community, this is your town, this is your city, this is your state, this is your, keep kind of getting bigger with when we think of geography and societies and so on and so forth. But I'd love to see us, how can we not only connect with the classrooms and, of course, say, okay, now we're learning about different countries. Great, let's connect with a school in a different country. But let's do some exchange programs. Let's get kids outside of their comfort zone and into these other cultures. Because I think when you really meet that person face to face and have these conversations and experience these things and go and explore their neighborhood and, spend time at school with them, you build those bonds and you understand their perspective and where they're coming from. And I think that's what makes that global connectedness more real. And so my pie in the sky is, students, going back to them choosing what they're interested in. They choose a problem in the world that they want to tackle. And then they go to that place and they work with, a scientist in that area, and they study it and they investigate it, and they attend the local school, so that they're getting that experience, for the cultural perspective. But, again, breaking down those four walls of a classroom and saying, how can we get kids out into the world, and not just out into the community, but really the community of the whole entire world, and engage them in these, because the more that we understand each other's backgrounds and perspectives that they're coming from, I think that the better our world's going to work together. So that's me again saying, no, I'm ignoring, how do we finance that? How do we manage that?
Well,
ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is bliss.
But imagining. I mean, we don't have, but I think, the conversation is important. Okay, so I'm looking at the time, and we've really just got a few minutes left in our time. And I would like to give you both an opportunity to talk about two sort of closing thoughts. First, I guess, the trend or the priority maybe that you think is most important in ed tech moving forward. So name the one priority that you think schools should be focusing on. And then lastly, tell us about why you love the work that you do.
All right. Well, I think for me the priority is really personalized learning. It's what I strive for. It's what I've been working really hard with my teachers, and just getting them to just take that extra step for their students, and in giving them choice and giving them voice and all of that that comes with individualized learning. So I would say that would be a priority. And what's the other question again? Oh, what fascinates me about
the work that you do? Yeah, what are you passionate about in the work that you do?
Right. I really, really, really love working with teachers and students, and feel like technology is one tool, technology is one um, device, I would say, or that helps them, that makes them empowered. Because I feel personally, and this is something that I talked about in the summer during my MAET course in Galway. Personally, I feel like I grew up thinking that I wasn't creative. For example, I had this fixed mindset that that I always thought, well, I'm not creative and I can't do creative things. But through technology, I've been able to do films, and I've been able to do animations, and I've been able, things that I'm proud of. And I never had like the manual ability to do it, in other ways. So I feel like technology can really empower in so many different levels. So I'm passionate about that.
Thank you.
All right, so I suppose it's my turn.
Thank you.
I would have to agree with G that it's the personalization, it's the opportunity to give students, learning on their level, wherever that level is, and engaging kids where they need to be engaged, rather than trying to push through the cookie cutter learning model, because I feel like we all recognize that it's just hard to do it, and I think technology is the way to help alleviate some of that data mining and have the answers and be able to just make those decisions. And then I guess gosh, I love to geek out. No, I feel for some reason, technology is something that I've always just been interested in, and I'm one of those people that's not afraid to click and to figure it out and break stuff and put it back together. And what I love about educational technology is that that's where I can help other teachers. I love teaching, and being able to help other educators see and being able to make their lives easier is it's good stuff, right? Being able to get them closer to being comfortable with personalizing education, but not taking hours and hours and hours and hours to do that, so that showing them how we can simplify what they do in order to focus on kids and their learning. So so that's what I like to geek out about and figure out how I can help support the classroom. So puts a smile on this face. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's just really exciting to listen to both of you today, to listen to your passion coming through in this conversation. We thank you deeply and sincerely for your time, for your expertise, for your thoughts, for the vision that you've laid out for others in the EdTech community. We did have some great conversation happening on Twitter, though no direct questions, which I kept watching for. But you can certainly go back and take a look at the Twitter feed at #MAETBridge to see the comments that people were sharing out, the quotes that people were sharing out to the Twitterverse that you were saying. So thanks so much for adding your voice to the global conversation about EdTech today. I will just say to conclude that this has been The Bridge at the Masters of Educational Technology program at Michigan State University. You can watch the recording of The Bridge from today at bridge.educ.msu.edu. It'll be up in a little while once the video processes. And the next Bridge conversation will happen again on the third Tuesday of October. That'll be October the 16th from 12 to 1 Eastern Time. And that day we're going to be talking about technology in social studies classrooms and how to leverage technologies and the practices, right, in which they're embedded to support students' learning in history, geography, social studies curricula. So please join us for that. And again, thank you so much, G and Sean, for your conversation today. That's it for The Bridge. Thanks from Rohit and from me.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.